alien abductees of Reddit, or people who have claimed to see a UFO, what's your story? I can't say for sure what happened to me that night, but here is what I know. I was driving home for the weekend from school at Indiana University. It takes me about 2 hours to get home, and I left Bloomington around 10 p.m. At exactly 10:53, I am on a rural stretch of the 2-lane highway I take home, and I notice what appeared to be flashing lights behind me. I thought, great, I'm getting pulled over. So I turned onto the next country road about a quarter of a mile from where I noticed the lights. As the car came to a stop, I started to open my glove box to get out my registration and proof of insurance. The lights suddenly disappeared, and no car drove past. Now here is where the story takes a turn for the weird, and I'm sure you guys will think I'm just making it all up because it really does seem like something straight out of a typical UFO movie or story. The electronics in my car started to go haywire. The radio was randomly changing stations while the volume kept going up and down, while the dome light and the headlights started to flicker and turn off and back on. This was at 10:56 p.m. I start thinking to myself that my battery must be failing, or else I have a short somewhere in the electric system of my car, so I lean down to pop the hood so I can take a look at the battery, and that is the last thing I remember doing. The next thing I know, I open my eyes and see nothing but the night sky full of bright stars. It was a cold night and it seemed like I'd never seen stars that bright in my life. I sat up and looked around, and I saw absolutely nothing. Nothing at all. I was in the middle of a field, surrounded by corn stalks left over from the recent harvest. As I started to come to my senses, I started to freak out. Where am I? Why am I asleep in the middle of a field? Where is my car? I got up and started walking towards the distant headlights I could see from a road about half a mile away. When I got to the nearest intersection, I looked at the signs which read 350 North and 50 West. I was half a mile away from my car, which was just right off the main road. I started walking towards the headlights I could see on the main road. I can't say how long it took me to walk the half mile, but it couldn't have been more than 10 or 15 minutes. When I arrived at my car, all the lights were out. My battery had died, which struck me as odd because I couldn't have been gone for that long. I looked at my phone, which was sitting on the passenger seat, and the time was 2:17 a.m. Over 3 hours had passed since I turned off onto the side road for the flashing lights behind me. I remember sitting in my car completely dumbfounded, wondering what the hell had just happened to me. After about half an hour of just sitting there, I remembered that my battery was dead, so I got on the phone and called AAA to come out and give me a jump. It took about an hour for them to get out to me since I was a good distance away from the nearest town, during which time I just sat in silence, running through the possible scenarios in my head concerning what had just happened. To this day, I couldn't tell you what really happened to me that night. All I know is I can't think of any plausible explanation as to why I woke up over half a mile away from my car in the middle of a cornfield more than 3 hours after I had stopped. I've only shared this story with one other person, my uncle. I'm sure people would either look at me like I'm crazy or they would call BS on the whole story, and I can't blame them. If somebody came to me with a story like that so closely mirrors the stereotypical encounter story, I probably wouldn't believe them either. Not my story, but my dad's. As a consequence of this not being my story, I can't insist that I know what I saw and all that. All I can tell you is that I believe him and he has no reason to lie to me. My dad has over a dozen stories like this. He grew up in rural Illinois, near a woodsy area. UFO activity was apparently high back then. I don't know if it was just my family or the whole area, but my dad and grandpa would sit on the porch and watch lights fly around their house for fun. This was a long time ago, when my dad was a kid. He's in his 60s now. They would watch the stars dart around like laser lights and laugh about it. It's mind-boggling to me now. I've only seen that kind of thing happen once or twice, and it freaks me out. Besides that, a bunch of other weird stuff would happen to my dad. Some of it is pretty similar to the stuff described in this thread. Actually, isolated earthquakes in Illinois that nobody else felt, bright orbs floating around in the sky and following him around, etc. It's been a while since he told me these stories, but one of the particularly weird ones has always stuck with me. FYI, I'm completely aware that it sounds like my dad was just messing with me, and trust me, I'd prefer to believe that. But I have good reasons to trust him. For starters, he's never lied to me about anything else. He wasn't the type of person to make stuff up for show. He also had absolutely nothing to gain from making this up. He never tried to publish it or even write it down. He would just talk about it sometimes. Anyway, so my dad was in his teens, and weird UFO stuff has been happening his whole life at this point. He's out on his driveway for whatever reason, doing whatever people do when they live in a woodsy rural area. His parents aren't home. They're out shopping / at work / whatever. Suddenly, this big black car pulls up into his driveway. Tinted windows, completely black. My dad just kind of watches it pull in, not sure what to think. Something to remember here, not only is this a rural area, but it's about 50 years ago. People were a lot more trusting back then. Nowadays, you'd be crazy to leave your front door unlocked, but back then it was no big deal. So, this strange black car pulls into my dad's driveway. It's making no noise at all, which my dad noticed right away. The door opens and out steps a super tall, fair-faced white man. He has blonde hair, an extremely well-tailored black suit, and black sunglasses on. Right away, my dad could see there was something off about him. He looks too perfect. Flawless skin, a childlike smile, and very overdressed for a hot summer day. He looks distinctly out of place. The man walks up to my dad and asks for his name. My dad, around 15 at the time, asks him why he wants to know. The man smiles and explains he just wants to ask him a few questions, and means him no harm. Bemused, my dad agrees, but he's still wary of this strange man. First, the tall white dude asks my dad if he lives here. My dad says yes and asks why he wants to know. The man has a completely relaxed, non-confrontational tone and seems almost giddy, like he was really excited to be having this conversation. His childish, overzealous grin hadn't faded in the least. He asked my dad if he had seen or felt or heard anything that he felt was outside of the ordinary. My dad said sometimes, and again asked why he wanted to know. The man just kept grinning, and by now my dad was feeling pretty uncomfortable. He had never seen this guy before in his life. He didn't appear to be any kind of government agent. His behaviour was far too unusual. Suddenly, the man's demeanour completely changes. His grin disappears and he looks worried. Without so much as a goodbye, he opens his car door, gets inside and drives away, still making no noise at all. A couple of minutes later, my dad's parents come back from shopping. Now for the really weird part. My mom saw the same frickin' dude 30 years later. She was in a bookstore looking for something to buy. Don't know the details really, when she turned around and noticed this tall, fair-looking blonde guy in a black suit sitting at a table in the cafe 30 feet or so from my mum. He was reading a newspaper. Sitting across from him was another dude, dressed exactly the same as the blonde one. They still look strangely out of place, somehow too perfect, too clean. Now, my mum had heard this story from my dad before, and she actually recognised my dad's description of this man. He definitely stood out. So she's kind of taken aback, trying to figure out if he's actually the man my dad had seen all those years ago. The blonde guy notices my mum looking at him. Again, his demeanour completely changes. He stands up, turns around, and quickly walks out of the bookstore, with the second guy right behind him. WTF, right? I'm actually freaking out a bit thinking about this. I'm 22 now, and I have to wonder if I'm going to run into this awkward blonde stalker. It's like the MIB sent their most inept agent to follow around my dad, or the most obvious aliens ever are trying to study my family in our natural habitat. I don't friggin' know. I know this is all very vague. I'm going to bring it up to my dad tonight and try and clarify a few details. I'll be honest, I've pushed this story out of my head because it weirds me out. Well, here goes. I guess I would consider myself an abductee. As a child, I had experiences of being abducted. I would lie awake in my bed all night, in a state of hypervigilance, trying to observe the bedroom door, closet door, windows and walls around me all at once, until I exhausted myself to sleep. I have various memories of the little grey aliens grabbing me by the wrist to lead me around places outside of my bedroom. Wherever they took me, nothing resembled a ship or anything, just a plain room. Counting my spine, they would run their fingers up each vertebrae on my back, and to my child's mind they were counting them, and entering my room through the walls and so on. I'm terribly afraid of needles, and I'm always worried that the nurse is going to touch the bone of my arm with the needle. The small grey ones are about as tall as toddlers, 3 foot I suppose, classic grey. Large heads, big insect eyes. Their torso and limbs are very slender, and you have difficulty figuring out how they stand and walk upright carrying that large head. Their fingers are very long, and the long fingers and the eyes are the creepiest things about them. Being with them is like being in the same room as a very creepy doll or mannequin, except they move around and are alive. They have a very disturbing vibe about them. Their skin is grey and seems not to be flesh. It looks like it's made out of construction putty or something like that. They have no wrinkles and no musculature. Their skin doesn't wrinkle when they move, and you can't see muscles flexing or anything like that. They don't seem to have any personality or will. They are just like drones or something. I imagine that they probably stand in a closet when they are not working. But they still seem to be organic. They are not machines or robots. That skin and those eyes are their real skin and eyes, not a spacesuit or a helmet. I also have memories of a big grey alien, perhaps 6 feet tall, who I would be brought to after the little guys were done with me. She definitely had a personality and a sense of presence about her. Her skin seemed to have more features. She wasn't just putty like the little greys. I don't know how I thought she was female, but perhaps her features were more slender. She would look into my eyes with her large eyes, and she could see all of my thoughts. I could sense her in my head. She would say things to me, clearly as an attempt to get me to believe them or buy into them. I could recognise them as not being my thoughts, but she didn't seem to care. Trying to push against her will is like pushing a car in neutral when it's coming down an incline. The car pushes you instead. Having her in my mind is a very disempowering experience, and I would almost liken it to rape. But I don't know what rape is really like, and I imagine it's way worse. But I'm trying to give you an idea of what it's like. It's not cool or fun at all. Someone else is in your innermost sanctum, your own mind and thoughts, and you didn't invite them. You don't want them there. And they're just doing whatever the hell they want. At various times, she told me, telepathically, don't make too much trash, or people will get sick, and stop cutting down so many trees. She also told me, we are very grateful for your help. You're a big help to us in our project, and don't tell other people about us because they can't see us, and they will only get upset. She tried to make me feel positive about being there, but I wasn't having any of it. I only wanted them to take me back home. I have no idea where I was. They've never told me any secrets of the universe, and I've never had any hybrid alien or non-grey experience. For what it's worth, I've had sleep paralysis experiences, and to me, these are different. Just like a dream is different from a nightmare, and a nightmare is different from sleep paralysis. In sleep paralysis, I have a dream, or nightmare, about a physical presence that is hostile or angry and is restraining me or physically accosting me. I panic for a few moments, find that I can't move, and then I jerk myself awake. Once I'm awake, it fades away quickly, just like a nightmare becomes not so real when you wake up. With alien abductions, I don't find myself knowing that they've happened. I just wake up feeling really bad, maybe several days in a row, and I might have daydreams about aliens or remembering scenes from alien abduction shows. Sometimes I wake up in the early morning with the sense that they just left. I won't be able to sleep for hours, and I'll be very aware and afraid of doors and windows. I'm a grown man, and when this happens, I'm not able to fall back to sleep for at least an hour. As a kid, I remember finding an alien abduction book in the library, and it was like a door had been unlocked. My mom took us to McDonald's afterwards, and I finished the book there. I couldn't put it down, and for the next 3 days, I was in shock. It was like confirmation that they were real, that other people did know about them, and that I was really never safe from them. After that, as a teenager, I got my hands on all the alien abduction books and shows that I could find. They scared the life out of me, but I had to keep reading them. I have strong opinions about depictions of grey aliens, and there are some I consider to be very accurate, while others seem like a stylized interpretation by someone who has never seen them. Basically, the more realistic or human they look, with facial features such as cheeks, septum, nose, wrinkles, or under the skin musculature, the less authentic it seems to me. Also, the eyes might be completely insectoid, wrapping around the sides, not forward facing or oval like a human's. I suppose a wasp or a mantis has the most alien-like eyes out of all of the insects. There are certain cats I've seen that seem to have alien-shaped eyes. In my 20s, I started seeing a therapist. I have depression, and during some really intense sessions, I recalled the memories of the aliens, the specific memories I outlined about. I don't believe the memories were blocked or anything, I just never dared ever to recall them, because the whole thing is so terrifying. I believe it's a form of PTSD. It really does interfere with your sleep and mood. After that session, I was shaking so badly the therapist wasn't going to release me to let me drive. She had to walk me through breathing exercises to get me to calm down. If I was someone other than myself, I would be completely skeptical and conclude that alien abduction experience is another type of sleep paralysis, or that reading too many scary alien books will corrupt your mind, or that it is a cover for sexual abuse. But why would you dream up aliens? They're as small as toddlers and frail looking. They never touched me sexually anyways. But me having had the experiences I had, I just can't believe it. Even if they devise an experiment where they hook people up to machines and have brainwaves proving that certain types of sleep paralysis is the alien abduction phenomenon, I would still believe they were somehow real, because the experiences feel real, even after you wake up, not like a dream, nightmare or sleep paralysis. I don't believe that aliens or organic creatures that evolved on another planet and fly here in advanced ships. The physics of faster than light travel just doesn't work. The only explanation I can come up with is that either they are creatures that can travel interdimensionally, perhaps they come from another dimension themselves, or they exist as independent entities in human consciousness. I know both of those are too crazy to really be explanations, but to me, those creatures are more than nightmares. I know that on a logical level, this is some kind of nightmare or brain disturbance, but let me tell you that people that suffer from this really do suffer. Some people made up a name for this: post-abduction disorder. They aren't trying to say that abductions are real, but are just trying to help people who suffer from this. Of course, it's not taken very seriously, and I understand why, but I do wish sufferers could talk more freely about it, without fear of ridicule or dismissal. I know it sounds completely crazy to people who haven't suffered it. This is the most I've ever told anyone about it. I'm not interested in going to groups or anything. My suspicion is that they are convinced that there's a government cover-up. I'm not interested in conspiracy theories. This is a story of my father's. It happened in 1982 while my father was stationed on a military base in New Brunswick. One night my father's best friend and his girlfriend left just after dark to go see Tron. There was no movie theatre near the base, so they had a long drive ahead of them. They said goodbye to my father and left. About an hour later, my friend's father and his girlfriend were back on the base. The car pulled in, and my father immediately noticed that it was damaged pretty badly and covered in several different colours of paint. My father asked them what had happened, why they had not gone to the movie. They brushed him off and went to bed. Dad said they looked pretty shook up. A few days later, my father got out of his friend what had happened. My father's friends were driving along a stretch of highway with not much around but trees and hills. When they rounded a bend, they noticed that a bunch of strange lights were coming over a hill just ahead, where no light should be because there was nothing around for miles. Just at the base of that hill was a parking lot for a park of some kind, with a narrow entrance. A bunch of cars were pulling into the parking lot to investigate the lights, so my father's friend pulled in too. Everyone got out of their cars and were about to start hiking to the top of the hill when a large disc with flashing lights rose above the hill's peak, emitting a loud, strange sound. Everyone who was there ran for their car and tried desperately to crash their way out through the narrow entrance, as only one car could fit through at a time. Cars scraped together, breaking parts off, transferring paint. My father's friends drove back to the base as fast as possible. My father's friend took him to the spot that had happened. There were car mirrors and other miscellaneous parts littering the parking lot. A few days later, men in black suits showed up on the base looking for people. They talked to my father's friend, then sent him on his way. My father asked him what the men wanted to see him for. They said that he'd better shut up and don't tell anyone about anything that happened if he wanted to keep his military career. One night, I go down to the kitchen to drink water at about 4 AM and I hear this weird, kind of low-pitched buzzing sound coming from outside. I go out to the backyard and I kid you not, I see this frigging bright rounded object, UFO, hovering about 600 feet right above me. I just froze there. I almost felt like I was paralysed for a moment. I watched it ascend higher into the air and take off at an incredible speed and disappear into the wintry clouds. That night, I had a dream that I was abducted. Now when I think about it, I wonder if the dream was real, but was purposely made out to seem like a dream. I obviously don't know for sure, but it was a very scary experience. I have posted this a long time ago, but here it is again. I had a chemistry professor in high school who was a very upright, respectable man. He also coached the soccer team that I played on. I have absolutely no reason to doubt this story, and he wasn't the kind of guy to joke about it anyway. When he was in college, he, his girlfriend, another friend, and that friend's dog were walking along the beach one warm night in Rhode Island. His friend and the dog ran into the dunes, leaving just my teacher and his girlfriend. As they were sitting there, a bright light started moving across the sky, and then rapidly got bigger as it approached them. Within a minute, a giant spaceship was hovering above the ocean. It hovered for about 30 seconds, perfectly silent, and then shot off again, rapidly shrinking and then disappearing in the distance. Him and his girlfriend were absolutely flabbergasted. When the friend and his dog showed up, neither of them had seen or heard anything, though they were past the dunes and away from the beach. But here's the kicker. My teacher and his girl went back to his parents' house after and immediately started telling what they saw. His skeptical parents devised a clever solution to prove if the story was true. They brought each of them into a different room, gave them a blank sheet of paper and a pen, and had them independently draw the ship they had seen. They both drew the exact same picture, with the same shape and ring of lights around the middle, and estimated its width and distance from the shore similarly. At this point, telling our class the story, my teacher drew the ship on the whiteboard for added visual effect, and it was a wide oval with a ring of lights in the middle and a bright light on the bottom. I'm not sure if alien abductions and whatnot are true, but hearing this guy tell this story was impressive. Abduction encounter. I really hope this doesn't get buried because I've never told anyone about this. I remember going outside of my house because I could see an amazing light show through the window. It looked like red, white and blue LED lights, like the ones you get at Chuck E. Cheese, but extremely bright and lighting up my entire house. As I go outside, I see a huge saucer-shaped craft spinning incredibly fast, but somehow I was the only one outside that night witnessing this incredible sight. I had somehow lost all my senses except my vision because I couldn't hear, feel or smell anything in those moments, as I was sure it was a freezing winter night, and living on a dirt road I was used to the smell of dust in the air. Anyways, it was spinning so fast that it was somehow liquefying but remaining perfectly intact in a saucer-like shape. I then saw a white flash of light and was somehow transported to my high school Ramada. I was living in Mexico at the time and would go to school in Arizona, so you can imagine that I didn't just sleepwalk there. I was laid out on one of the many dozen tables that were located underneath a huge metal roof that stands on top of it. I couldn't move, and I was bare-chested and was having difficulty breathing. I still couldn't smell, hear or feel anything. Next to the tables is the soccer and football field, and there, in the middle of the field, I could see the craft had stopped spinning and was somehow grounded and not making any movement or emitting any lights anymore. Immediately after that, I was surrounded by, I kid you not, what everyone recognises as grey aliens. They were so tall and horrifying, I tried and tried to scream, but nothing would come out. I was paralysed with fear, but I could sense my screams inside my chest. I've never been so frightened in my life. All I recall was them surrounding me and just staring into my eyes. Those diagonal black slits we're so used to seeing. They all had a different coloured uniform, that they were made out of some crazy reflective material that I've never seen before. That's all I remember about that night. I then closed my eyes and found myself standing in the exact place where I first witnessed the red, white and blue lights. I began to cry and just went to sleep and never told a soul about that night. After reading some posts on here, I too feel a lump on my left earlobe, right where people usually get a piercing. I feel like digging it out and seeing if it could too be a little metal BB. Please feel free to comment any questions. Edit, excuse my grammar please, I'm very tired writing this and I've never been much of an online story writer. I'm sure this will get buried at this point, but the comments I was reading were asking for an honest story. I wish I could tell you I have proof. I don't. But I can tell you this really happened. I was living out in the country with my girlfriend's family when I was 19 in eastern Canada. She went out with her friends one night and I was alone in the house with her mom since her father works nights. I was upstairs reading a book when the dog, who was tied up outside, started going absolutely nuts. I figured there may have been another dog on the property and maybe they were fighting, so I ran downstairs and threw on my boots to get out there to break it up. When I flung the door open, I got goosebumps immediately. What seemed like every dog for miles around was barking, yelping and howling. I barely had time to think about what the hell was going on when I saw an object floating above the tree line, which was probably about half a mile to a mile away. I can only describe it as a disco ball, because that's exactly what it looked like. It was round and about the size of a pencil eraser from that distance. It would float to the left and right and slightly up and down. It would do this for maybe 10 seconds and then disappear. It would reappear a second later in a different spot. It did this probably 6 times, enough that when it disappeared, I would start scanning the tree line to see where it would reappear next. It was completely silent. I ducked my head in the door at one point and saw that my girlfriend's mother was asleep on the couch. I think I even called her name once, but she didn't wake up. I didn't want to go inside and rouse her for fear of missing it. The last time the thing disappeared, in the exact spot that it blinked out a teardrop-shaped light from the top of the sky, shot straight down and behind the tree line extremely fast. I stood there for a second trying to figure out if I'd actually seen this, or maybe was hallucinating, and almost on cue, as if to give me proof that I had seen it, I heard voices, and looked to the road and saw that a couple had stopped their car and had been standing on the side of the road watching the very same thing I had been seeing. I didn't hear actual words, but there was clearly surprise in their voices. I thought about going down to the road to talk to them, but it was quite a ways off and I was in my pyjamas. Before I really had a chance, they drove away. That's about it. Maybe not the coolest UFO story ever, but the dogs and the people make it stand out as a truly odd experience for me, because I know it wasn't something I imagined, and I assume it wasn't a normal aircraft because I don't think dogs generally get riled up over planes or helicopters. Okay, here it goes. The first time I had ever seen anything, I was 7 in Houston, Texas. I used to like to climb on top of my mom's Suburban in the driveway and stare at the stars. One night, I saw an intensely bright floating light over the tree line, probably about half a mile away. I hollered, but nobody came to see it. I did not see anything else until March of 2008. This experience happened between the 10th and the 15th, but I can't give a specific date because I was up for 4 days trying to come up with some explanation to satisfy what I had seen. This was in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. My mother lived in a garden home community, all houses the same size, all one story, and you had great visibility distance-wise. I walked out of my buddy's place at exactly 4 AM to a bright starry night. When I walked out, something caught my eye to the left of me. I looked over and saw a bright blue, yellow, green, white, red, orange strobing flashing light floating silently to the left. I stood in awe of it and did not want to go grab anyone because I did not want to miss anything. I watched as it passed in front of the moon behind my friend's place, and I saw the outline of the craft. It was a teardrop, sunflower seed type shape, and the craft seemed to have the light being transmitted from the top half of it. It was almost as if it was transmitting some type of light pattern upward. It also had a dark, thin, smooth line of exhaust that disappeared 50 to 75 feet behind it. This all occurred no less than 400 yards away from me. After it passed the moon, I ran inside and grabbed someone. He saw it, but it was too far away to make out what it was. I went home, which was only a few blocks away, and looked out from the driveway, the same direction the first craft had come from. I saw 2 dim white lights, slowly coming over the horizon, at a slow pace, heading towards me. I then ran inside and grabbed my mother out of bed. We stood there for about 20 minutes, while 5 separate craft flew over us. First came 2, then 2, then 1, about 6 to 7 minutes apart from each other. Maybe 20 miles per hour, maybe 200 feet up, completely silent. The way that they looked from underneath was each one had 2 huge bright white lights, which were maybe 30 to 40 feet across each, but they were so bright it was hard to get a good estimate. They also had a pulsating red one between the white lights that dimmed and relit. I would estimate from the size of the white lights that each craft was maybe between 150 and 200 feet wide. The last craft that flew over us flew over lower and slower than the first 4 had. Then it made a noise. It let out a sound to this day which haunts me. What I could best compare it to would be this sound.
Okay, I'm going to light this first one and let's see if they'll go anywhere. That was cool.
Followed immediately after by this sound. That's the best I could find. Take those 2 sounds, except make it digital, and multiply it by 50. This was loud. The craft did that twice. These crafts flew directly over us, and I believe that the sound was an acknowledgement. Whatever was piloting it knew we were watching it, kind of like a hello. I immediately started crying. I had no idea what I was looking at or had just heard. The second big experience I had occurred a couple of weeks later. I was standing in my driveway, smoking a cigarette, listening to my iPod, somewhere around 2 AM. I decided to pause my iPod to turn on the back light, waved my hand over it a couple of times, making somewhat of a strobe pattern. I didn't hear anything, I didn't see anything come up, but I got that being watched feeling. I looked up, and directly above me was a trapezoid-shaped craft with rounded edges that had a dark red and black pulsating glowing outline. It was like flowing electricity. It was not even 75 feet up. I could have hit this thing with a rock. I stood there while it hovered directly above me, completely silent, for maybe 10 to 15 seconds, while it made this kind of motion similar to the ball that Luke trained with in Star Wars. It hovered side to side, front to back in a smooth motion, never getting more than 20 feet away from its original position. It was extremely fascinating, but I was frozen stiff. After those few seconds, I waved one hand at it in a friendly manner, then it changed light pattern and hovered away behind my house. Upon deeper inspection, the fact that it knew that I saw it but made no effort to evade my detection makes me think it wanted me to follow it, although I was too freaked out to think about that at the time. I have seen that same craft on 3 other different occasions, once again in Tuscaloosa, once in Hoover, and once in Bessemer. The time I saw it in Hoover was at an apartment complex at the top of a huge hill with a great overlook. It was night time and I was with friends. Over the overlook, I saw a grey craft facing my direction that looked similar to a Hoth fighter, forgive the Star Wars references, and as soon as I saw it, it took off to the right silently, extremely quick. The times in Bessemer and Tuscaloosa, the trapezoid shape appeared in the sky solid white, stretched to twice its length, then the bottom shot up to the front, like it hit light speed or something. I do frequently see what I like to call streaks. They look like shooting stars, only very low, move slower, but they still have tails that stream behind them. They can also appear in many different colours. One strange story is one night when I had a dream in Tuscaloosa. In the dream, I couldn't see or hear anything, but I could feel things. I was laying on something cold, and I felt what seemed like rubber between my legs around my junk. It was very strange to me, since a lot of people who report abductions report sperm and eggs being taken for breeding programs. The next morning, I went to let the dog out in the backyard, which is very small. To the left of the patio, there was a solid white ring in the grass that was maybe 8 to 10 feet wide. I showed my mother and she had told me that she had heard a noise that woke her up the night before, but she just dismissed it. Another extremely confusing experience I had occurred in my driveway in Tuscaloosa. To give you an idea of where this occurred, look up Shelton State Community College. The house was less than a quarter of a mile from the campus in the Englewood neighbourhood. It was night time and I heard this static that I could compare to a jet. I looked over and directly above the community college was a light blue slit in the sky. I would say that it was maybe 200 yards long, completely vertical, and had what looked like white electric currents coming off of both sides of it. I looked at it and maybe 25 white things shot out of the slit to the left, one at a time, at a quick pace, leaving the trail behind it that I previously talked about. After they passed, the bottom of the slit went upward until the slit closed, and it made a strange sound, and then it was gone. I've also had a bunch of experiences with orbs. Some solid lit that float across the sky or move in strange patterns, and some that brighten up to a great intensity and then fade as they pass. After that first big experience, I started doing some research because I was so confused. I understand that I've had an abnormally large amount of experiences, and I honestly can't tell you why. I wish I could. I found a type of UFO witness called a contactee. These people are similar to abductees, except they are kept up with. I have no idea why I've had so many experiences, and I've only listed a fraction of them. My best guess would be that since I acknowledged the presence of whatever it was I was seeing, it decided to keep up with me. It's kind of a gift and a curse. There are so few people that I can talk with about it and be taken seriously. I want to seek hypnotherapy to see if there might be anything else I could uncover. I'm grateful, but still don't know much about my experiences. If y'all can get anything out of what I've shared, then great. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. Alright, I have a bizarre one for you guys. Oh boy, here we go. This is back in 2003, when I was 15 years old in the area of Columbus, Ohio. I was up late one night finishing an English paper that I had postponed until the last minute. It ended up taking longer than I thought, and I wasn't done until about 3:10 AM. I finished up, turned off the computer, and went upstairs to fall asleep. I get in bed and notice the clock says 3:15 before I finally close my eyes to get some sleep. About 30 seconds or so after I do that, I begin to hear footsteps up the stairs. At first, I was thinking, who the heck would be up right now? Maybe my dad? One thing I'll always remember were how odd the steps were. They were abnormally slow, and with each step, the foot would slide forward until it hit the next step and then lift up. Eventually, the steps stop, and I assume whoever it is made it to the top of the stairs. I don't hear anything, and then I get a feeling of a presence in the room. I have a feeling whoever it is now at the end of my bed. I'm currently lying on my side with my legs turned over, so that my lower back is kind of facing upward. I begin to feel a pressure go into my lower back, like a hand going into my body and tapping me to see if I'm awake. This is when I'm starting to get really cautious and concerned. Next, I feel this same pressure pierce through my legs and stays there. It almost sounds and feels like whoever this is just laid down beside me on the side facing my face. I sit there silently and wait about 10 seconds, or so it felt, and feel another pressure go into my chest. It felt as if someone was taking their hands and put them inside me. The pressure in my legs was still there. The pressure in my chest begins to build, and it felt like a swirling, buzzy, warm feeling. This is where it gets even more weird. So, whatever this is on my bed begins to whisper to me, but it sounds very clear and as if it was coming from inside my head. It seemed to be telepathic. It says, "Put it on your head." I immediately start to get nervous and panic internally and wonder what the hell is going on. I tell myself that I have to open my eyes and force myself to count down from 5. I open them and I see a transparent face in front of me about 1 foot away. I'd say the face was about 50% transparent. I couldn't make out any clear, distinct facial features, but I could see 2 darker circles where eyes would be, and a small oblong shape for a mouth. This was all processed in about 1 second. The next second, my reaction is to open my eyes and mouth wide in disbelief. I immediately saw this other being's face do the same, as if it was just as shocked. About 1 second after that, I shut my eyes, throw my sheet over my face and go into extreme panic and become paralysed. The last thing I saw was this being's face opened up wide and moving backwards. I hear this being fall off the bed from leaning back and makes a thump on the floor. It wasn't a very loud thump, but still audible. It sprints the heck out of my room and down the stairs. I never hear a door open or anything. I lay in my bed awake the whole 3 hours until I have to get up for school at 6:30. The first hour I couldn't even move. I was in shock, and the scene kept playing in my head. I knew my door was still open, but I wanted to close it so bad. After the first hour, I calmed down enough to get up and close the door, jumped back into bed, and just kept thinking about it until my sister got up. I looked back on this a lot since then, and it forever changed my life. I've only spoken to a few people about this, and I've never even mentioned it to my dad. Of course, some will say that it was a lucid dream or some hallucination, but it was very clear, and I was awake the entire night. I've never had anything like it since then, and never expressed any odd mental symptoms. I was also 15 and had never had a beer or any drug by then. A few other notes from that night. The being glowed a light blue that caused the area around him to light up a bit. The being was laying sideways beside me, with its legs travelling through mine. This accounts for the first feeling of pressure that stayed after the touches on the lower back. I think when it said to put it on your head, it was referring to whatever it was building up inside my chest. Maybe it thought I was asleep and it was speaking to my subconscious. Man, that night was a doozy. So that's it. 10 stories of alien abductions, alien encounters and UFO sightings as found from Reddit. If you've enjoyed this video, please click the like button. If you haven't already, please click the red button to subscribe to the channel and enable all notifications so that you'll know the next time a video goes up on UKPF Extra. As always, all that's left for me to say is, thanks very much for watching.